5 minutes.
I would caution my friend from South Carolina and others against jumping into bed with Judge Cannon, who's been rebuked repeatedly by the 11th Circuit because she is completely lawless.
This may look like a routine oversight exchange, but it's actually a stress test of how power justifies itself. What's really being tested here is whether the justice system can claim neutrality while lawmakers openly frame conclusions as settled facts. This raises broader questions about where prosecution ends and political narrative begins. In this video, we'll break down how authority, credibility, and accountability collide inside a congressional hearing, and why that collision matters far beyond one case.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
I would caution my friend from South Carolina and others against jumping into bed with Judge Cannon, who's been rebuked repeatedly by the 11th Circuit because she is completely lawless. But let's go back to the actual evidence rather than all the procedural stuff about when you were sworn in or not. I don't blame you for not remembering that. You've been probably sworn in a dozen times. It doesn't jump out at you. I want to go back to the evidence, though, that Donald Trump knew that he was lying about the election. And I'd ask you to say, if you could, specifically, who gave evidence to you that supported your conclusion that he knew that he was lying?
That came from a number of sources. It came from staff in the White House who talked to him and told him that his fraud claims were not true. It came from staff on his campaign who told him that. It came from members of the Department of Justice. It came from state officials who, when he tried to press them to do things in contravention of their oath, they refused to. They asked him for evidence, and his co-conspirators, and they never provided it. Over and over again, the people who had who were best situated to know how the elections were conducted in these states, he either avoided contacting them or disregarded the clear debunkings that were provided to him, such as by the Georgia Secretary of State.
Right, and I mean, that's a lot of evidence, but we know that his attorney general at the time also concluded, quote, he knew well that he lost the election, Bill Barr, and yet he incited a riot on January 6th, and 4 of the brave officers who defended the Capitol and defended my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are here today. Not a single Republican member of this committee has recognized them or thanked them for their service, and I would like to do so today. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, my colleague from California referred to a couple statements from your former colleagues in Penn and the Eastern District about your impeccable reputation as an apolitical career politician. As an alum of the Southern District of New York myself, I can tell you that many of my former colleagues also feel the same, and that's saying something coming from the SDNY to the EDNY, as you know. Mr. Smith, did you ever speak to President Biden about this case?
Never.
Did you ever receive orders or direction from President Biden or anyone else in the White House about this case?
No.
Did you ever receive any direction from the Attorney General Merrick Garland regarding how you should, whether or not you should charge this case?
No, I was given the independence to make that decision on my own.
An independent special counsel, exactly. I just want to point out to my colleagues who seem to think this is a politicized investigation that on February 10th, over a month, 2021, over a month after January 6th, Marco Rubio said the January 6th attack on the Capitol was far more dangerous than most realize, and we have a criminal justice system in place to address it. Who oversaw the Department of Justice on February 10th, 2021? Who was president?
February 10th, 2021. That would be Joe Biden.
So Marco Rubio wanted Joe Biden's Department of Justice to investigate Donald Trump and his January 6th insurrectionist. I want to ask you in my last few seconds, Mr. Smith, you're not the first special counsel to investigate Donald Trump. Special Counsel Mueller, also of impeccable integrity, concluded that the 2016 Trump campaign welcomed foreign interference from Russia and used it to help them. Donald Trump has made it a litmus test to be hired in this administration to say that the 2020 election was fraudulent, even though, as you have established, it was not. And now there are senior officials in this government who are responsible for protecting our elections, who have our election deniers. Can you describe in a few seconds what your concerns are about the upcoming election based on your investigation and what we know today?
I believe political litmus tests are not proper for career prosecutors. I think my experience over 30 years as a prosecutor in the Department of Justice is having people who are not guided by party allegiance, but guided by experience. That's how you can trust the criminal justice system. It's the same way with our election system.
Gentleman's time has
Thank you.
expired.
I yield back.
What we just witnessed was not a stray exchange or a throwaway line buried in procedural noise. It was a moment of direct confrontation spoken plainly on the record under oath. When Congressman Dan Goldman asked Jack Smith, without qualifiers, without theatrics, whether he had ever spoken to President Biden about the case against Donald Trump, the answer came immediately. Never. When pressed again whether any orders, guidance, or direction came from the White House, the response did not waver. No. And when the question turned to the Attorney General himself, the answer was the same: independence, full authority, sole responsibility. In a hearing filled with accusations, insinuations, and political theater, this was a moment of clarity. And clarity is dangerous in Washington, because what this exchange revealed is not just the posture of one special counsel, but the fault line running through American politics today. At the center of it is a question older than any single election or any single figure: whether the rule of law can survive when power is loud, personal, and relentless. Jack Smith did not offer a speech. He did not raise his voice. He did not frame himself as a hero. He simply stated how the system is supposed to work. Evidence is gathered. Decisions are made independently. Political allegiance does not enter the room. And no president, past or present, is meant to sit above that process. That matters because so much of the current debate depends on erasing that distinction. The argument being pushed is not just that this investigation is wrong, but that it must be political by definition. That if a former president is investigated, then the sitting president must be pulling the strings. But what we saw in that exchange was a direct rebuttal to that narrative, spoken under oath in public with consequences attached. Goldman's line of questioning also pulled something else into the light: the sheer number of voices inside the White House, inside the campaign, inside the Department of Justice, and across the states who told Donald Trump the same thing. That claims of fraud did not hold up. That requests made to officials ran against their sworn duties. That evidence was asked for and never produced. Over and over again, the people closest to the facts said the same thing, and those answers were ignored. This is where the conversation shifts from politics to responsibility, because leadership is not tested when things go your way. It is tested when power slips, when outcomes disappoint, when reality refuses to bend. What Smith described was not a single disagreement, but a pattern, an ongoing rejection of verified information in favor of a preferred story. And when stories replace facts at the highest levels, institutions begin to strain. The hearing also exposed another uncomfortable truth. The independence of prosecutors is not a partisan concept. It is a structural one. Goldman reminded the room that even prominent Republicans, in the immediate aftermath of January 2021, publicly called for accountability through the justice system. The Department of Justice did not belong to one party in that moment. It belonged to the Constitution. And yet, here we are, years later, watching that same principle come under attack. Not because new evidence has emerged, but because the investigation reached someone powerful. Jack Smith's final remarks cut to the core of it all. He spoke not about personalities, but about standards, about why political loyalty tests have no place in prosecution, about why trust in the system depends on experience, professionalism, and distance from party machinery. The same standard, he argued, applies to elections themselves. Systems only work when they are defended by people willing to accept outcomes they don't like. That idea, acceptance of reality, is now one of the most contested concepts in American life. What this moment revealed is that the real conflict is not left versus right, or one name versus another. It is between a system built on restraint and a culture increasingly driven by personal allegiance. Between institutions designed to outlast individuals and movements that demand constant validation. And that is why exchanges like this matter. Not because they generate headlines, but because they document the record. They show who asked the questions, who answered them, and who stood by their words under scrutiny. Long after the sound bites fade, those records remain. The future of American democracy does not hinge on one hearing or one investigation. But it does depend on whether the public understands what independence looks like when it is actually exercised, and whether it is defended when it becomes inconvenient. Moments like this remind us that the rule of law is not self-enforcing. It survives only if citizens are willing to look past noise, demand evidence, and resist the temptation to treat power as personal property. That is why we bring you these moments. Not to inflame, but to illuminate. Not to cheer, but to document. Because a free society depends on informed viewers who understand what is being said and what is being denied. If you believe transparency matters, if you believe accountability should apply to everyone, and if you want to see these hearings without filters or spin, subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work as we continue to expose the truth one record at a time.